Welcome back to the deep dive. If you are listening to this right now, it's because you are looking for an edge. You aren't here for the fluff. You're here for the signal in the noise. So before we even drop into the deep end today, do me a massive favor. Smash that like button and subscribe. We are building something serious here, and we need you on the team to keep bringing you the insights they don't want you to have.
Today is going to be different. We are wrestling with a text that is, well, it's heavy. We're breaking down the ebook Long-Term Time Preference, Men of Vision, Faith, Virtue, and Success by Conrad Reicher. And frankly, looking at the source material, this does not read like your standard clean your room self-help guide.
No, absolutely not. Riker isn't trying to be your life coach here. He frames this entire book as a war manual.
A war manual.
Yeah, he calls it a declaration of independence for the modern man. He explicitly describes it as dangerous literature, written specifically for men who are, exhausted by the modern cultural narrative, men who are tired of apologizing for their own existence.
It's a very high-stakes setup. Reicher is essentially saying that the modern world is designed to keep you weak, and just reading this is an act of rebellion.
And look, we're going to go as deep as we possibly can today, but Reicher's text is encyclopedic. It is ultra long and incredibly incisive.
It's a dense read.
It is. So if you find value in what we discussed today, and I really think you will, you need to go to Amazon, Kindle, or Google Play Books right now and buy the full copy. We're giving you the map today, but the book is the actual terrain. You need that manual in your hands.
It's necessary because the terrain Reicher describes is grim. His central thesis is that the West, our entire civilization, is in a state of freefall. But here's the twist. He argues it's not collapsing because of some barbarian invasion or, an external enemy. It's collapsing from within.
And he pins this collapse on one specific concept: time preference.
Right. And this is usually an economic concept, but Reicher applies it to morality and culture. Time preference is simply your ability to delay gratification. Low time preference means you can sacrifice the now for a better later.
You plan. You build.
Exactly. High time preference means you want it all right now. You consume immediately. And Reicher argues that our major institutions, from media to universities, have been captured by feminist and Marxist ideologies that actively engineer high time preference in men. They want you impulsive, emotional, and weak.
So the argument is that male weakness isn't an accident. It's a product feature of the current system.
That is Reicher's core claim. The system, he argues, it feeds on your impulse control issues. And the only way out is for men to tear themselves down and rebuild brick by brick into men of low time preference.
Let's start with the diagnosis then. The book opens by analyzing what Reicher calls the present man.
Yeah.
This is the guy living entirely in the moment, but not in a spiritual zen, way more in a desperate, addicted way.
It's the dopamine trap. Reicher leans heavily on a 2024 Stanford study that is, honestly, it's terrifying. The study analyzed the neurological response to social media engagement, and it found that the rush from getting a like activates the exact same neural circuitry as cocaine.
So when we say people are addicted to their phones, that's not a metaphor. We are talking about biological dependency.
Precisely. And Reicher introduces a case study to really illustrate this, a guy named James. On paper, James is winning. He's a software developer, pulling in, $120K a year. Young, healthy, nice apartment.
Sounds great.
But he confesses to Reicher that he feels this profound hollowness. Why? Because he spends 3 to 4 hours every single night scrolling TikTok, chasing engagement, mining for validation.
He's looking for the hit.
Reicher calls him rich in data but bankrupt in meaning. This is digital heroin. It keeps you sedated. And the book points out a really damning piece of context here about the tech elites. We know that Steve Jobs and Bill Gates, the literal architects of this digital world, they strictly limited their own kids' access to these devices.
That's always the smoking gun for me.
Yeah.
The dealer doesn't get high on his own supply. They knew what they were building.
It suggests they knew they were building a machine designed to harvest human attention and destroy focus. And for Reicher, the most destructive application of this machine is pornography.
The stats in the book on this are, they're staggering. I think most people know it's common. But the numbers Reicher presents are just on another level.
They represent a systemic rewiring of the male brain. Reicher cites data showing consumption has doubled since 2010. But the kicker is the demographic saturation. 92% of men aged 18 to 25 are watching it regularly.
92%.
Yeah.
That is effectively an entire generation of men.
And Reicher's analysis here goes beyond just saying it's morally bad. He argues it's structurally destructive. It trains the nervous system to prioritize novelty over loyalty. You get the sexual reward without the effort, the risk, or the connection. Riker says this just destroys the architectural capacity for long-term relationships. You literally lose the patience for it.
Because you're used to one-click satisfaction.
Right. It creates what Nietzsche called the last men. The book brings this up, a generation of men who are comfort-chasing, unambitious, and who kind of smirk at the idea of struggle.
They want their safety and they want their dopamine.
Exactly. And Riker argues that while men are sedating themselves, the institutions that used to guide them, schools, courts, media, have turned hostile.
This is what he calls the cathedral.
The Cathedral of Lies.
Oh.
It's his term for the synchronized consensus of the universities, the media, and the legal system. Riker argues these institutions have been captured. They're no longer neutral. They are engines of feminist and Marxist ideology designed to pathologize masculinity.
To view traditional male traits as a sickness.
A sickness to be cured. And he points to the education system as the first battleground. He highlights the shift from the classical trivium, grammar, logic, rhetoric, the tools of how to think, to what he calls grievance studies, which teach you what to feel.
And he links this to real-world consequences.
Big ones. He explicitly connects the Boeing 737 Axe tragedy to a corporate culture that, in his view, prioritized diversity quotas and ideology over hardcore engineering competence.
That is a brutal connection to make. The argument being that when you prioritize identity over merit, planes literally fall out of the sky.
Physics doesn't care about your diversity quota. That's the sentiment in the book. Reality asserts itself. But Riker says the most personal betrayal happens in the family courts. He calls the legal system gynocentric.
Meaning centered on the female imperative.
Right, and the numbers he provides here are tough to swallow. He notes 70% of custody decisions default to mothers. But the anecdote about Mark Tyndall in Minnesota, that one really sticks with you.
It's a case study in what Riker calls indentured servitude.
It is. So Tyndall earns $5,100 a month. The court ordered him to pay $4,200 in support.
Let's do the math on that. That leaves him $900 a month to live on. That's 82% of his income gone.
Riker uses that example to prove his point. The system views men as paychecks, not parents. It's designed to extract resources while stripping authority. And this attack, it starts before men even enter the workforce. The book spends a lot of time on the medicalization of boyhood.
You're talking about the ADHD stats?
Correct. 9.4% of children are diagnosed, the vast majority boys. Riker's argument is that high-energy, competitive, aggressive male behavior is natural. It's evolutionarily necessary.
But in a modern classroom, it's inconvenient.
It's disruptive. So instead of channeling it, we call it a disorder. He contrasts this with, say, the Spartan Gauge or the Exosa initiation rituals. Those cultures looked at a high-energy boy and said, we need to forge this into a warrior. We look at that same boy and say, we need to drug this into submission.
It's a fundamental disagreement on biology, which I guess leads us to probably the most radioactive chapter in the book, the myth of equality.
This is where Riker really abandons any attempt at political correctness. He asserts that nature favors the strong, and that the modern narrative of equality between the sexes is a lie.
A lie designed to handicap men.
That's his argument. That he doesn't just philosophize, he brings data. He talks about physical reality. Men have, on average, 61% more upper body muscle mass. But he moves beyond that to performance. He cites a Norwegian military study on mixed-gender combat units. And the data in the book showed that mixed units completed 32% fewer objectives than the all-male units.
There was also that specific anecdote about the New York female firefighter.
Right. During a mandatory drill, she collapsed under a 160-pound load. Couldn't do the job. The book couples this with a NIOSH study showing mixed crews had a 70% increase in injury rates. Riker's point is brutally simple. Fire, gravity, and war do not care about fairness. If you ignore biology to protect feelings, people die.
He also pivots this biological lens onto relationships. He discusses hypergamy.
Yes, the evolutionary instinct in women to seek partners with status and resources. Riker's critique is that modern men have it backward. They act as consumers of female attention.
Simping, chasing, begging for validation.
And Riker's argument is that women are not the prize.
That's a key flip in the script.
It is. He argues that the man who builds himself into a fortress of value becomes the prize. The goal isn't to chase women. The goal is to build a life so compelling that women want to be part of it.
So let's look at the pivot. The system is rigged, the culture is drugging you, biology is being ignored. What is the actual solution? He doesn't just leave us in despair.
No, the solution is the title of the book, Long-Term Time Preference.
Which means what, practically? How does a guy apply this?
It means regaining the ability to suffer now for power later. It's the total antithesis of the modern world. Riker uses the famous Stanford marshmallow experiment as the foundational metaphor.
Remind us of that one.
Kids were offered one marshmallow now, or two if they could wait 15 minutes. The researchers tracked them for decades. And the kids who could wait, the ones with low time preference, they ended up wealthier, healthier, more successful across the board. Riker applies this test to your entire life.
He talks about the compound interest of character.
It's the idea that skills and virtue compound just like money. He tells a story about a mechanic in Boise. This guy worked 10-hour shifts fixing engines, hard labor, but instead of going home to drink beer and watch Netflix, he spent 3 hours every single night learning Python code.
And nobody saw him doing this. No immediate reward.
No likes, no applause, just 3 years of lost sleep and grinding in the dark. But eventually, he built an AI diagnostic tool for engines that he turned into a business making $3 million a year. That is time preference. He traded comfort for sovereignty.
Riker contrasts that builder mentality with what he calls the renter mentality of our civilization.
He compares us to the Romans. They build aqueducts to last 1,000 years. They were building for eternity. We build strip malls to be flipped in 5 years. And he points to Elon Musk as the ultimate modern example.
The stories of him sleeping on the Tesla factory floor.
Exactly. The media mocked him for that. HR consultants called it toxic. But Riker argues Musk wasn't trying to be balanced. He was operating on a 50-year time horizon. He was willing to endure extreme discomfort now to force a future getting to Mars into existence.
Okay, but most listeners aren't Elon Musk. How does a regular guy start reclaiming this power? The book offers a tactic called strategic silence.
This is one of the most actionable parts of the text. Just shut up. Riker cites data that high-status men speak about 30% less than their peers.
He mentions Jim Lighthizer, a CEO who implemented No Talk Tuesdays.
An entire day of silence. Riker argues we're leaking energy constantly through chatter. But deeper than that, he attacks therapy culture. The modern reflex is to ask, how do I feel about this? Riker says that is the wrong question for a man. The masculine question is, what is right, or what is necessary?
He reframes emotional control. It's not repression, it's weaponized stillness.
Right, and he brings up Marcus Aurelius and Stoicism, but not in the way you usually hear it. He reminds us that Meditations wasn't written in a library. It was a diary, written in a tent on the front lines of a war. It was a tool for survival.
So, to get that clarity, Riker suggests monk mode.
He advises adopting a horarium, a strict monastic schedule. You delete the apps, you sit in a room in silence. Riker calls it regaining sovereignty over your mind. If you cannot sit in a room alone for 30 minutes without reaching for your phone, you are not a free man.
You're a biological puppet for advertisers.
Exactly. You have to opt out of the dopamine feed to think clearly.
And this internal rebuilding is just the prerequisite for the final section of the book, Rebuilding the West.
This is where Riker zooms out, and he is very clear. Voting isn't going to save you. Complaining on Twitter isn't going to save you.
Politics is a lagging indicator of culture.
Exactly. Riker concludes that the West will only be saved by men building parallel institutions. You opt out of the corrupt systems and build your own strongholds. And the core unit of that stronghold is the family.
The death of the father chapter.
It's heartbreaking but mobilizing. We know the stats fatherless homes are the single biggest driver of crime and poverty. But Riker flips it from a statistic to a mission. He tells the story of the Texas rancher.
I love this story. The old man who found minerals on his land.
Yes, he was offered millions for the mineral rights. Could have lived like a king. He refused. He lived a modest life until he died. Why? Because he wanted to preserve the land for his grandsons. He wasn't thinking about his own retirement. He was thinking about his bloodline 3 generations down.
That is the definition of planting a tree you'll never sit under.
And that is the essence of long-term time preference. It's rejecting the narcissism of the modern age and accepting the burden of building a legacy. Riker also distinguishes this from networking.
Right, networking is just transactional. What can you do for me?
Riker calls for covenantal brotherhood, men bound not by business cards, but by shared struggle and shared values. Men who will actually hold you accountable when you start slipping.
It's a heavy mandate. The book ends with a thought that really lands like a punch to the gut. The world does not reward weakness. Nature does not care about your feelings. History remembers only the strong.
It's a cold truth, but Riker argues it's the only truth that matters. The universe is indifferent to your excuses. You either build or you decay.
Listen, we have covered a lot of ground today, but like we said at the top, this is just a glimpse through the keyhole. Riker's arguments are backed by hundreds of pages of data, history, and strategy that we simply couldn't fit into this discussion. You need to go to Amazon Kindle or Google Playbooks right now and buy Long-Term Time Preference, Men of Vision, Faith, Virtue, and Success. Treat it like the manual it is.
And if you want to see how Conrad Riker applies these concepts to real-time events, he is very active writing essays. You need to follow him at Conrad Riker on Substack.
Absolutely. Don't just consume this content and move on to the next cat video. Take action. Smash that like button. Subscribe to the podcast so you don't miss the next Red Pill deep dive, and go build something that lasts. We'll see you in the trenches.